wealth is, taken from us in multiple vectors in ways that we don't often see or understand. So I've always been sort of in the, in my interest in Bitcoin being about freedom more so than wealth.
Well, hey everyone, welcome into Pushing the Limits. Today I'm super excited to have Brandon Bucher with me. Welcome to the show, Brandon. Lightning Network CEO. Welcome in. It's fantastic to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, CEO at Lightning Pay, not the whole Lightning Network, which is an open network. That's all right.
Yeah, at Lightning Pay. Thank you for that correction. Brandon, give us a little bit of a background on your background, how you got into Bitcoin generally, how you got to be in the role that you're in today, and your take on the whole world of Bitcoin.
Yeah, sure. That last one's a big one.
Yeah,
See if we
we've got 2 hours.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm Brandon Boucher. To start off with the Bitcoin story, I guess. I encountered Bitcoin quite a long time ago. But my first entry point into Bitcoin was more a political, technical fascination, right? So prior to actually encountering Bitcoin, I was a US libertarian. I had a healthy understanding already of the, I guess, monetary policy and how the Fed worked, and had a general understanding of the way that our wealth is, taken from us in multiple vectors in ways that we don't often see or understand. And so encountering Bitcoin that first time was really me seeing something that I thought was interesting from an opportunity perspective. So I've always been sort of in the, in my interest in Bitcoin being about freedom more so than wealth. And that manifested in me sort of playing around with it a little bit a long time ago, and then sort of moving on, thinking that, I never really bought into the investment thesis in Bitcoin, to be completely honest, not for a very long time. But I saw it as something that people could use in circumstances where they were pressured or limited, and was something that I was fascinated in that way. A number of years later, I started developing my career. I was a product executive primarily, is my background. So I worked with a relatively large product team building technology, and focused on customers, and focused on making good products. It wasn't probably until about, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago that I started renewing my interest in Bitcoin, and it was again sort of seeing the ways in which it was being used. When El Salvador sort of started seeing it as a way to introduce a new currency to their own society for the reasons that they were doing it. When I started to see, to be honest, when I started to see Michael Saylor like come out and give a wholehearted presentation about the ways in which the scarcity in Bitcoin can change the way that we sort of think about the way money works. All of that sort of changed my perspective a little bit. I started seeing it as something that could really happen, could really actually change, and could actually really change things, and importantly, introduce that idea of scarcity to money, right? So I was always interested in it from the freedom aspect, the way we could use money without someone controlling it. And later on became convinced that the monetary properties of it could be not. I could always see it as being valuable, but what I saw in the end, that it was possible, that there was actually traction, that
huge
that this thing might not be stopped. And that's when, throughout my product career, I ended up learning a lot about building products, but actually started getting into the community, started meeting people, going to meetups, met my co-founders, and we all met through the BitKiwi meetups here in New Zealand. So a series of meetups that bounces around the country, and started talking about what we needed here in New Zealand, right? So in New Zealand, the infrastructure around Bitcoin is pretty limited,
Yeah.
or was, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We had a few exchanges, access to a lot of international exchanges, but that was very difficult. And there's two problems we saw with that. Um, we were all fans of the technology. We knew about the Lightning Network. We're very familiar with how it worked, played with it a lot. I had been running a node for quite some time. And access to those technologies just didn't exist, right? So we could see in other countries,
Yeah. Frustrating.
companies springing up, bringing new technologies and new ways of using Bitcoin all around the world, and that wasn't happening here. And so, uh, we thought about it, and the tagline we came up with, sort of really early on in the process of building the company, was connecting New Zealand to the Lightning Network, and that was sort of our mission when we started thinking about what we were going to
Love
build.
it.
So we built Lightning Pay, which Lightning Pay, it started out as a concept that's basically around introducing payments on the Lightning Network to merchants here in New Zealand. We can get into the reasons why we think the Lightning Network has the opportunity to displace, payment networks across the globe. But importantly, in order for that to happen, we had to build more infrastructure. So Lightning Pay became much larger than about just, merchant payments. We had to create a way for, the New Zealand dollar to be connected to the Lightning Network. And so we built an exchange, and then off the back of that, the product that we initially started out thinking about building. So Lightning Pay is a bridge. It's a bridge between New Zealand dollars and Bitcoin via the Lightning Network. And off of that, people can buy and sell Bitcoin. They can use our products for merchant services, accepting payments. But they can also, we have services like Bill Pay that allows you to pay your fiat bills with Bitcoin.
Wow.
So ultimately, the way we see Lightning Pay is it's a, Bitcoin first, technology forward way to access better money.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's ultimately what we're after.
Wow, that's a really good synopsis, Brandon. Thank you. I'm just so excited because, I've been in the Bitcoin space for about 5 years. I came through that whole horrid COVID situation that we all experienced, realizing the government overreach, the control that they had, watching the truckers. And I talked to Jeff yesterday about, he was a node on in the trucker protest, trying to get Bitcoin to the guys up there. And really realizing for the first time, like having my paradigm broken, that we're not living in a complete free market and a complete democracy that I'd always believed as a child, or what I'd grown up with, sort of thinking that's the way the world was, right? In my privileged life, really, if prior understanding this, and then getting into Bitcoin. Initially, I was the opposite. So I'm complete numpty when it comes to technology. I need my husband to do all of that sort of stuff for me, right? But I'm very diligent at researching and understanding, and I just went deeper and deeper, and layer upon layer of the onion of the Bitcoin world sort of opening up. And I initially came to Bitcoin for the wealth generation, hoping to outpace debasement and inflation and maintain our assets, realizing that fiat currency, studying monetary history, all of that sort of thing, and realizing, we're going down the toilet, right? And then really staying for the revolution, as Ricardo Salinas famously says, the Mexican billionaire advocate for Bitcoin. Because it really is, to me, and I talked to Jeff yesterday about this, it's almost a spiritual journey at this point, where it's about really, the future of the planet and the monetary system and the broken money system that we have, and hoping that Bitcoin can play a major role in the future of this. And then trying to grapple with the technology when you're not a technologist, and you're not a guy like you that's really had a background in this. How do you implement it? How do you build it into your business? And yesterday when I was talking to Jeff, and I'll put the links down below for everyone, please go and listen to that episode with Jeff Booth, the big OG in the Bitcoin space, wonderful man. Is is, just moving more and more of your time into the Bitcoin space and learning about it and really doing the hard yards of understanding it and implementing it bit by bit and moving yourself into that realm. Because one of the big problems that I've, not understood how to do is how do I pay, with Bitcoin, how do I live my life in the Bitcoin economy and less and less in the fiat economy that, so that we're running. And you're really enabling that.
Yep.
Is that how I'm seeing it? So like I had some, like major questions for you around, how does that work? Like obviously, how does the Lightning, in fact, we should back up a little bit and give a bit of history on the Lightning Network to explain, this was what, 2015, Joseph Poon and Thaddeus Stryer were the initial white paper that came out. Why is a Lightning Network necessary? Why can't it be all in the Bitcoin layer? Let's start a little bit there with a bit of history of the Lightning Network.
Sure. Let's start there. I mean, the way that I always like to describe this is just taking a step back and like you said, talking about the necessity of it, right?
Yeah.
And we start by thinking about what Bitcoin, the network is, right? So the base layer, right? The main Bitcoin network accomplished, its major breakthrough was consensus, right? So if you've
Yep.
dove into that, the Byzantine generals problem was the key computer science breakthrough. Combining the technologies that Bitcoin combined allowed a decentralized network to agree on a network state, but not only that, to agree on transaction validity without a centralized entity sort of providing the check mark,
Yeah.
right? And it's fundamentally what it did. Now, that technology, over the years since Bitcoin's launch, people looked at it as that breakthrough as something they could apply to other things. They could, it was interest in blockchain, not Bitcoin, right? So like people saw that as an interesting breakthrough. The important aspect of that, though, is that breakthrough created a network that uh, held a couple of things at the highest order. One is decentralization, right? So there is
Hmm.
no central
No
party.
one's
It's a
controlling it.
distributed
Yep.
network. And in through that decentralization consensus, right? So we know what's true across that network. Now
Hmm.
that network, frankly, is just never going to scale to 8 billion
Yep.
people in the world, right?
That
And
trilemma, what do you
that's,
call it? The blockchain trilemma that you've
yeah,
either got
that's right.
security, scalability, or you're gonna have to compromise on one. So
You,
it's
you
totally,
got to pick two, right?
yeah,
So we have a secure decentralized network, and that is what we have. And what it's not going to do is it's not going to be fast and it's not going to scale to 8 billion people.
yeah,
But what it does do is allow us to have a fundamental base layer on which we can agree the status of the network, right? I like to think about that Bitcoin base layer as the final settlement layer of the global economy in the future, right?
well,
And
yeah.
so what we're talking about is it's funny when you read sort of folks that have encountered Bitcoin for a long time and maybe they have a poor opinion of it. It only settles 7 transactions per second. It's too slow, and it can't scale. These things are common tropes, and it's understandable, like because it is true, right?
Yeah, the
It is
base
true
layer.
that those things are true, but its application is not going to be 8 billion people making transactions peer-to-peer. What
Yeah.
it is going to be is the way that we understand the final settlement layer of the monetary system that we're currently building, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Um, it- so we can use the analog of a central bank's ledger, right? Like this is the last step in what we say is the final ledger across all of the systems that are going to be built on top of this. And so entering the Lightning Network, its real purpose was to scale transaction frequency and speed, right? So what it fundamentally does is it takes a real Bitcoin transaction, um, and allows us to pack many transactions into that final settlement transaction, right? So if we think about the Bitcoin layer as a final settlement, of a set of Bitcoin, the Lightning Network is an abstraction of that that allows us to take many transactions and then settle it onto the Bitcoin blockchain. And
So
that's fundamentally what it does.
just to make a picture, so if I wanted to buy a coffee, you're a coffee shop owner, right? And I've got a Lightning Pay app, and I'm in the Lightning Network. I don't know how you say that properly, and I want to pay for my coffee. I've already preloaded a certain amount of Bitcoin onto that
Hmm.
layer, onto that, and then I can the Lightning the coffee shop also has to be a part of the system, right? The part of the Lightning Network, and then I can pay them, and we can transact hundreds of times backwards and forwards before it actually has to be settled on the Bitcoin layer. Is that
Hmm.
how it actually works in practice?
Yeah, so we can dive into a little bit more about how it works fundamentally, but what we're doing is we're making a single Bitcoin transaction where two parties agree who owns uh, how much Bitcoin, right?
Mhm.
So the the analog is, like you in the coffee shop, you make a single Bitcoin transaction. Initially, you own, you know, uh, one Bitcoin, they own zero. We'll use round numbers.
Yeah.
The next day you make a transaction, you give them 0 point, or we'll call it 10,000 sats,
Mhm.
and you own the balance of that
Mhm.
transaction. But the difference is we don't place that transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain. What we do is
Yeah.
we trade a transaction with
Mhm.
each other that we don't actually settle. However, we can settle it anytime we want to, right? And the next day and the next day, we continue to do transactions where what we do is we agree upon a final transaction that we can settle on the Bitcoin blockchain if we want to. Now, the magic of the Lightning Network is it's not just two parties involved,
Mm.
right? The magic of the Lightning Network is that, you, the coffee shop, its supplier, um, thousands of nodes currently on the Lightning Network can communicate with each other. And they can each trade these transactions that they haven't settled on the Lightning Network in order for you to pay someone across the world that you don't know
So it
that
just finds
happens
the
to be connected
path,
to each other on the Lightning Network.
goes through
Um,
the nodes, so to speak. It
that's
just
right.
goes, yeah,
Um,
and then yeah.
so, so the basic concept is what we're fundamentally doing is we're creating a new network on top of the Bitcoin blockchain, that allows you to send value to the person, across from you physically, or, over the internet, or whatever the case may be. You don't need to be connected to them directly, but fundamentally what you're doing is you're releasing a certain amount of value to your channel parties, and that value gets moved across the network in a cascade to your final destination.
Yeah.
Um, and then fundamentally, lastly, when you do finally want to take that Bitcoin on chain, you can just settle that transaction that you have in your hands and put it on the Bitcoin blockchain, and now you have finally settled Bitcoin.
And the fees of this are very, very low compared to,
Yeah.
say, a Visa that's taking MasterCard 2-3% out of every transaction. I run an e-commerce store online. Every time someone uses a Visa, they're losing a heck of a lot. I'm losing a heck of a lot. Um, that's one of the attractions of this, that the fees are actually really, really low to do all of this. How does that sort of play compared to, say, a Visa or MasterCard?
Yeah, so this is an interesting property of the Lightning Network, and I think um it depends on how far you want to go into this. I got a lot to say about this one.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about the Lightning Network, is that this transaction layer, you can think of it as equivalent to the way that Visa works, in terms of its practical purpose, right? So,
Mhm.
we're settling a transaction, or we are exchanging value in a transaction for goods and services, and we're doing it quickly. But the difference is that when you make a transaction on the Lightning Network, actual value moves from one person to another, right? We're actually sending money from one party to another, and we're doing it instantly, and we're settling that transaction with finality, right? So
Wow. Yeah.
it's over, and the money has moved from one person to another across the world to someone you don't know, and it's
Instantly.
actually money moving. Whereas with the Visa network, what we have is, ultimately, up to 15 parties communicating with each other about whether this credit can be can be serviced from one party to another. And the communication channels and the settlement layers and everything like that, we're talking about an immense amount of legacy communication that fundamentally
Wow.
goes into settling a Visa network
Yeah.
transaction.
Yeah.
We have something that is not only instant final, but is relatively inexpensive to actually operate and really actually moves money, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've probably heard this lately, but like Bitcoin is money, right? We're actually moving money from one person to another. Everything else we have in this world is credit,
It's
right?
credit. Everything's
And
credit.
so not
It's
only is
shocking.
the legacy system, relatively, expensive, it is cumbersome and complicated. It's also not real, right? It's
Yeah.
also just, two ultimately we involve 15 parties for two parties to adjust
Yeah.
uh, a ledger, right? To say I now don't own this and you do. That's fundamentally what's happening over there. Anyway, but the Lightning Network, fees on the Lightning Network currently for a typical transaction will be, 10 Satoshis, right? So
Yeah.
we're talking
Which is
about an
nothing.
infinitesimal amount of money.
Less than a cent type of thing.
I mean, we're running a business doing merchant transactions, uh, all across the country, focused in Queenstown at the moment,
Mhm.
really trying to build up an economy there. Um, and we currently don't charge a fee. We might at the moment, but we don't need to because it doesn't cost us anything.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And it really does help us to create. So the reason we're doing it that way ultimately is because we can, one, but also because it's a net value to our business to build this economy, right?
Absolutely.
We
Yeah.
want this to happen, and it's a
Agree.
it's a mission for us, right? So we're doing our best to sort of, see that demonstration of what Bitcoin and the Lightning Network can do in Queenstown, and this is how we're doing it.
This is just gold because I mean, I'm sitting up in Taranaki and I'm like, my mission with this podcast, and I've been in the longevity and health optimization space with the podcast for 10 years. I've been doing it for a long time, and that's my job. That's I work in functional medicine, run clinics, have a biotech company. Um, but I'm pivoting everything now more and more into Bitcoin, AI, tech revolution, the things that because health and wealth go together. And for me, for some of my listeners, this has been a bit of a jump, I'm sure. But for me, I've been in the space actually for 5, 6 years now, and I've been studying this in behind the scenes for really deep and really long. And for me, you to have health in our broken health system, you need wealth. You need to be able to pay privately, and I've lived through this through family experiences, 10 years of looking after a disabled mum, having a dad that was sick, etc., etc., spending an absolute fortune. If it wasn't for Bitcoin, I wouldn't have been able to. And so for me, these two go hand in hand, health and wealth. And I'm always been preaching about, self-sovereignty in your health, that you need to take control of it. You can't just outsource it to anybody. This is not just something you give out to any one doctor. And
Hmm.
you are in charge of your body and what goes into it. And you need to make the right decisions the best you possibly can, put the right people on your team, be preventative in your mindset. And that marries very beautifully with the Bitcoin philosophy, really. So for me, it's really a hand in hand. And when with the Bitcoin in New Zealand, like I've been studying, most of the people that I study are all overseas, right? They're all in the USA mostly because that's what, they're at the forefront of everything. And I've just been recently only just diving into the world of New Zealand and how it's building here. And because I've been frustrated, like you were years ago, going, why haven't we got that here? How come I can't do that here? Why can't I have a, Bitcoin backed Visa card or whatever the case may be? And then realizing, hang on a minute, we've got Lightning Network here. Yay! We've got some, exchanges here that are building and people that are building in this space. So now I'm trying to okay, what have we got here? And to connect to the New Zealand network. And one of the missions of this podcast is to get your word out there to the people that we can start building all of this infrastructure step by step together. And this is hopefully a mouthpiece for you guys and others that are building in this space to share this. This is happening in New Zealand, and for those overseas, for them to educate themselves on this as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of there's a couple of things in there I want to riff on, but like it's one of the most important things about the way we see our place here in the Bitcoin network, New Zealand. And that is, yes, we are sort of we're the sort of first company to start building this particular node on the Lightning Network, right, around New Zealand and offering services here. But we are building on an open system, right? You know, Bitcoin is decentralized. We're building on a system that anyone else can interact with, whether it's our merchants accepting Bitcoin, anyone with a Bitcoin wallet that's capable of spending the Lightning Network can walk up to those merchants and they can spend there. And it works just as well as something we built. We're building on an open network, and we hope that there's more. We're never going to build every use case for value in New Zealand, right? And we're hoping that more people build on top of that, because that ecosystem building on top of itself is fundamentally how we get to the destination we want to get to.
Yeah, where we're all going.
You also mentioned sort of a couple of times now that concept of spending more of your time in Bitcoin. Like that's what Lightning Pay is sort of aiming to create, is the capability of actually spending more of your time, and therefore sort of having more of your resources in this better money environment, right? I had a realization a couple last year, over the last 2 years, right? So I've for a number of years now, I have once I started understanding and really buying into the thesis around Bitcoin's store of value properties, I eventually, after too long, started buying more Bitcoin, and that's great, right? So I did that.
Yeah, we were
But
too late.
yeah, well, we're getting there. But what I realized was, if I have the opportunity to have better money, why wouldn't I always have better money, right? And so why
That's
do I
where
still
I'm
have
coming to. Yeah,
why do I still have
why am I still operating in fiat?
dollars in my savings account to the extent that I do? Why do I still in getting past that hurdle, asking myself those questions, I started thinking about, like, well, let's start running an experiment, right? Just a thought experiment. Bitcoin is volatile, right? So there's risk involved. Its ability to be used as money here in New Zealand, but across the world, is somewhat limited. It's you can find yourself over the course of a couple of weeks having a significant decrease in your purchasing power at this moment, because this monetary network is still emerging. But I started running an experiment where I started paying more of my bills in Bitcoin, right? I started buying a little bit more Bitcoin at the beginning of the month, going, I'm going to spend this on my bills at the end of the month. And over time, I realized that, while Bitcoin is volatile, if in my personal life, I'm cash flow positive, I'm creating more value than I'm taking away from the world, and I'm actually getting some income overall. If I move that to Bitcoin, on average, I'm going to win over time, right?
Yeah.
I might lose on a given month. I might, see my purchasing power decrease, but on a month-to-month basis, as I started buying more Bitcoin at the beginning of the month and spending it over time, I started realizing that I was coming out ahead.
Yeah.
So more of my value started moving into the Bitcoin network over time. And I realized that in the end, there's less and less reason for me to hold on to that,
Yeah.
dying
Safety net.
monetary
Yeah,
system,
that
right?
dying monetary
The
system.
convenience is one aspect, right? And
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to deal with.
Yeah.
But the other aspect is just, my own history of thinking, like, I need this much cash to make sure that I can make it through the next 6 months. And, whatever the case may be, all the reasons that I'm hanging on to
Yeah.
different pieces of this legacy network started to erode away when I realized that there are very few reasons why the better money isn't better for me to have,
For
right?
everything. Yeah. Absolutely.
And that really chipped away at things. And so, as we started going through the things that we were building for people to live on a Bitcoin standard, we started realizing like this, you can do this,
Wow.
and you just need to, the tools need to be built. So we're not all the way there.
No.
But we also in our own lives need to think about, you know, the dichotomy of like yes, we can say out loud that there's a new monetary system being built that is founded on better money. Um, and that's great, but we still sort of are hanging on to this old world because we have uh, one, there's a fear of the volatility of Bitcoin, right? We want to make sure that we're protected in some ways, and there's always going to be some good decisions made in that regard, right?
Yep.
But I'm finding myself less and less attached to it, and
Wow.
just
That's
finding
gold.
myself moving along that journey to living on a Bitcoin standard, because I believe now more and more that that is that's the way that I'm going to prosper, the most in the end, is to just find myself moving
Absolutely.
more and
Over
more into
time.
that new world, right?
And I'm in that process too, Brandon, and I haven't known how do I do it? Like how do I pay my bills in Bitcoin? And this is where the Lightning Network comes in. It's going to be so powerful, and I'm really excited to get going in this and starting to share about this with other merchants and people. And then there's the one thing that's been a thing for me that's held me back is, but what about the taxes? Because everything is a taxable event, and I haven't understood how do I, like my life is freaking complicated as it is, and when we take the next level that every transaction is a taxable event, how do you deal with that? How do you teach people to keep the right records, do the right things in regards to that as a merchant and also as a person just buying and using Bitcoin on the daily to
Hmm.
pay all their bills? What's been your solution for that? Because unfortunately, it's not there's not a it is treated as property in New Zealand, Bitcoin, and therefore it's not like cash that you can just use on the daily without incurring taxable events. How do you see that big problem? Which is, well, maybe it's a big elephant in my head and I can't just get my head around it yet. But how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, look, that is the biggest friction for a lot of people to get over.
Yeah,
Well, it's among them, right? So, yeah, I named a few others earlier, but
it's the
we
only
have
thing for me.
longtime
Like,
Bitcoiners that like when we first launched Bill Pay, like we had a number of people, send us emails saying like this is great, but I'll never use it because I don't want to have to deal with the tax consequences, right? The first thing that I'd say is like that's something I had to get over too, to some degree, right? If Fundamentally, what I told myself though is that if I do find myself paying tax, that means that it's demonstrating that I've actually come
you've
out ahead
made
and I've
money.
won in this
Yeah,
situation, right? So I had to get myself over that mental hurdle. Actually keeping track of things, I
that's a
think you
hard.
do need to think through. You do need to be deliberate about when you're choosing to do this, right? So one way is, I have a, I play with a lot of Lightning wallets, so I actually have quite a few. But having a Lightning wallet, if you're going to go spend at a merchant in Queenstown and Bitcoin Basin, you have a Lightning wallet that keeps a record of your transactions that you use there, right? And that's
It's
that's
all in it.
relatively straightforward to take a list out of, and there's a lot of tax software for you to do the tax
Like
calculation.
Coinleys and so,
Coinly's
yep.
one. There's a whole bunch of others. And so being deliberate about where you're spending the Bitcoin from is first and foremost a practical step you can take, right? At Lightning Pay, your entire transaction list, you're going to use Bill Pay. Your entire transaction list is exportable. You can send that to something like Coinly as well, and that works really well too.
Right, gold. Okay.
So it's we're trying to help with that, but it is a hurdle, right?
Yeah, it's
It's just
education
something that
around
I
because
had I had to develop sort of my own desire to get to that place where I'm
yeah,
like, I'm going to spend my Bitcoin and I'm going to deal with it because I think this is worth it. And
yeah.
I think that's fundamentally what it comes
Well,
down
that's
to.
putting your money where your mouth is, really, because you're leading the way for us, and then you can educate and teach other people how to do it, how to think about it, what the consequences are, what you things you need to think about. And it's hard. Like, I'm working with accountants that just have no idea about crypto and no idea about Bitcoin and how to manage it. And they're scrambling to try to get their heads around it too. Like, everybody's scrambling, to try to stay up with the technology on all fronts, right? Not just in the crypto Bitcoin world, but on all fronts. And so you're trying not to do anything wrong because you want to do everything correctly for the tax department and so on and so forth. But the tax department's not always giving clear guidance either.
Yep.
So you've got this sort of like, well, how does this work? Like, on a fundamental basis, practical basis, how does this actually work? Am I creating myself an audit nightmare next year when I go to do my taxes? So it's all of that sort of stuff, and I don't think there's a 100% answer yet. Like, we've got to step each other through this process, and that's maybe a session for another day when maybe you can find me a tax person that knows how to do all of this stuff, and we can riff on that and how to think about this. But these are the practical sort of stuff to getting it to becoming a medium of exchange that we're using on a
Yeah.
daily basis.
I mean, there's a few of those accountants out there. But it, I think the important thing here is that just recognizing that it is a friction, right? And just setting yourself up in a way that, this is not to say that, the right step is to just move all your money to Bitcoin, spend freely, and then not deal with the consequences of that decision.
No.
So, like, you can't do that, and that's okay. So I've been pretty deliberate about it, and I think that's really what the answer is today. I think that, you know my hope is that, we'll be able to affect some change around this, not just here in New
Yeah.
Zealand, but in the world. I think,
Yeah.
the introduction of Bitcoin, has been interesting to watch, right?
Mm.
Interesting in that, the whole, from the first time I encountered it, the whole concept of Bitcoin was foreign, and people, broadly looked at it with derision, right? Like,
Yeah.
it can never
It's for
work. It
criminals.
won't be a store of value. It's for criminals, whatever the
Yeah,
case may
all this
be.
rubbish. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that, there are things that we believe about Bitcoin, the store of value, there's a medium of exchange, there's unit of account.
Yeah.
The store of value, part of Bitcoin's
We're sort of
story
there. Yeah.
has already been toppled, right? Like that, where we're at right now in the world, that narrative has completely shifted, and now that's, to some
Now
degree
even the big
accepted,
banks and the big,
right?
black, yeah,
And I
sure.
think as we go along, like the way that we are seeing, the way that I've always seen Bitcoin, and then I think the way that we're seeing it and trying to present it, as a company, is that, Bitcoin is money, which is all of those things, right? And I think we just need to chip away at that, right? So here in New Zealand, we could use some payments innovation. We could use, there are a lot of arguments to introduce a de minimis tax exemption here in New Zealand and
Mm.
across the world, but one of them is payments innovation is necessary here.
Yeah.
The second one is tax compliance is difficult, right?
Mm.
And when we see people, with a desire to use Bitcoin for payments for coffee or whatever the case may be, that hurdle, stops that payment innovation from happening and stops
Mm.
tax compliance from happening because people are frozen and don't know what to do about it, right? So I think there's a lot of good arguments for introducing that sort of thing here in New Zealand. One of the things that I'm also involved with is the Bitcoin Policy Institute New Zealand, which is sort
Oh,
of a
wow.
relatively new uh, initiative group that we've began developing. So I'm on the committee of that group, and our top priority is a de minimis tax exemption here in New Zealand.
Brilliant. Oh, that would be absolutely amazing. And I know they're talking about it in the States, or there's, murmurs of it happening for smaller transactions. And that would free that whole space up to progress in the development of all of these payment systems, wouldn't it? And just make it clearer for people to understand what's happening. And, it's really a chance for New Zealand. I had Bucher on the show recently, a brilliant financial analyst from America, who's did a presentation on Bitcoin for me on the show, and he just said, like, we have to start innovating. Where was I going with this? But we've got to start embracing the changes that are happening. And if we don't, and he said he was a Kiwi that was born here and went overseas, but he said New Zealand has a chance to be at the forefront of technology, the forefront of attracting investment down here, not just for Bitcoin, but for all of the AI, the tech, the stuff that's happening, attracting good people down here to develop these things. And we're a small nation that could move really quickly, and we're an attractive country to people to come and live in. We have a beautiful country. We've got all this stuff going for us. We used to be at the forefront of technology back when I was a teenager in the 80s. Like we were the first with FPOS, and we were the first with what was it? A lot of the stuff back then, I remember us being sort of at the forefront, and then we don't seem to be, right now doing a lot of those things. And I'd love to see that, because when we attract investment down here and we attract talent down here and we get people working, we're going to create jobs, we're going to create a more flourishing economy, And this is, I think, I'm hopefully having meetings this week with people that are in the technology space in New Zealand who are wanting this to happen as well. And we're going to hopefully start having some forums and discussions and leading conversations around these sorts of topics, because we've got to move now. Like, we're at a crux point in the world where the world is changing so fast with AI. If we don't move now, like, we need to get ahead. If we don't, the next country next door to us is going to get the advantage, and we're going to be left hanging, swinging in the breeze,
Yeah.
if we don't make some changes, not just in Bitcoin now, but in the wider space. And I think, it's pretty exciting, but that's why I'm sort of getting more and more involved in this space. And, I don't have a background like you, but I'm very passionate about it. And I'm very passionate about New Zealand and us having opportunities down here for our young people. We're losing young people offshore constantly. Our brightest kids are going overseas because they can't see opportunity here. That
Hmm.
needs to be turned around, all of that sort of stuff. And that's a topic for another day. But we need to start. We can't be hanging on to these legacy systems and legacy investments and legacy way of doing things when the world's moved on from that, and we've got to move with it. And the head in the
Yep.
sand approach doesn't work. It's the same in the health world. People just don't want to know until it hits them in the face that they've got big cancer or some major thing happen, and then they're like, oh, what do I do now? It's like, be preventative. You can't, look for every eventuality, but you can prevent a lot of things, and you can be
Hmm.
proactive, that you stay healthy, keep yourself fit, do the things that would be good for you, pay some money now, get some testing done regularly, all of those things that we just need to be in that preventative mindset. And with the same token, in the technology world, we need to be proactive. We need to be moving forward. We need to be attracting the right people down here. And so, yeah, I'm just super excited that what you're doing, what you've started down in Queenstown and the basin there. I'm like, oh, maybe we can start something like that up here. You can maybe help us out, trying to get other people involved. So anyone listening who's listening to this in New Zealand, reach out to me or reach out to Brandon if you're interested in getting the Lightning Network going. If you want to adopt this, if you want to know more, if you just want to connect with other Kiwis in this space, because it's the more power, the more people we get in, the more power we'll have, the more we'll be able to affect change.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, one of the advantages that we do have here in New Zealand, I will say, is that we do have a bit of a permissive and accepting attitude as a population and things like this. Like, we've been actually blown away with the conversations we have in Queenstown, and the number of merchants and small business owners that have responded,
Wow.
to this Bitcoin ask, going like, yeah, I'm interested. Like, let's talk about it. It's been relatively straightforward to do that. So we do have that advantage. I think another one is that our leaders are accessible, to some
Mhm.
degree that isn't, the
Yeah.
same way in a lot of other places. But we do have, the same. Just riffing on some of the things you said there, we do have some of the restrictions or fears and handcuffs that sort of hold back a lot of small, relatively small countries. And that is that, we take a lot of direction from our, larger trading partners, right? Like a lot of the things we do here are just a reaction to the things that we're being told we need to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those things are not, those things are not being put in place for our benefit here in New Zealand, right?
No.
They are, from the very beginning of this conversation, the monetary system that we have right now is a control system, right?
Yeah,
It is a
totally.
control system, from the United States, who, back in 1971, not only managed to rug, their own currency, they managed to simultaneously, pull the rug from the entire world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every world currency was based on that dollar, which was supposed to be based on gold.
Based on the
And
gold,
now
yeah.
the entire world, for the first time ever, is divorced from real money, right?
Exactly.
And that system of control, is not just about money. There are many ways in which it occurs. And I think, from sitting here in New Zealand, obviously I'm American if you can't tell, but I've been living here for a long time now. Uh,
Hardly any accent.
but you know, from where we sit, what we need to do, in my estimation, is, take action for ourselves, right? Recognize that there are, some of these things we can say no to, and we can
Yeah.
create change and generate a, different momentum here for this country that's embracing some of the things in the way that we can, right?
Yeah, and saying no to some of these big international organizations that shall remain nameless, but that want to take control of these little countries and tell us what to do,
Yeah.
And I mean, people like Bukele in El Salvador, like that's just a shining example, really. I mean, radical. I mean, he went, straight to, having Bitcoin as a national currency and being used over there. And I know Jeff, advises the president over there, and he says that, when you go to El Salvador over the times that he's been there, like the change that's happened, the positive change in that country is huge. And so sometimes like it feels like the big countries, the big powerful ones are actually going down, and some of the smaller countries that are adapting to change faster because they have to, like if you live in, I think one of the disadvantages that we've had as Kiwis in a way is that we've lived in a safe democracy, or what we believe is democracy and free market, and we've had a really good run since the 1940s, right? Since World War II ended and Bretton
Mhm.
Woods and all of that. And the 50s were pretty good, and then we had some troubles in the 70s, or in the 80s, but overall we've lived in a pretty good place, and we all had a living wage, we were all able to buy houses, we were able to get our families in establish our houses, our families, and have a good life, right? That's breaking, and that's breaking at a speed now that is just, for our young people, disastrous. Coming out of college with degrees that are outdated before they even get out the door, they're saddled with debt, they've been sold into a dream that they'll be able to get a house and all of that, and they can't. They're just, the cost of a house in New Zealand now is just astronomical for what the young people are earning. And all of this is happening right around the world. We can see it all happening. And this is creating a massive divide between the couple of percent at the top that all this wealth is concentrating up to, and then this massive divide. And then you get the young people who are dissatisfied, unhappy, have no future prospects. What are they going to do? They're either going to go overseas, or they're going to develop a nihilistic attitude where they're like, well, stuff it, I can't get ahead anyway, so what's the point? And fall into some deep dark spaces and do bad things, or be depressed, or whatever the case may be, because they see no hope. Or they turn to socialism, where it's like, well, just tax the rich and take it off them and give it, without understanding the implications of all of that, like, and so, I don't, there's no easy answer for this, but we need to recognize that this is happening, that the system is breaking, and it's breaking faster now that the debt is spiraling out of control, really since 2008, since the first global financial crisis. Things have really sort of started to escalate. And then since COVID, in the COVID crisis, 40% of money was pumped into the system, in America at least, and that concentrated in the top 1%. It didn't stay down in the rest of the population, and so you're getting a very dissatisfied middle classes who are finding it harder and harder. And we belong to that. My hubby's a firefighter. They're fighting on strike at the moment. They've been offered 1%. You and I know that we've got like a 12% debasement and inflation rate as a hurdle. So that's why Bitcoin's attractive, because it's had a 40% CAGR in the last, decade. And maybe if that'll slow down, maybe it'll go down to 20%, but it's still one of the only things that's beating that sort of 12% hurdle. And they're being offered 1%. So in 2 to 3 years, like I said to my hubby, like that means that your wage is going to be worth 2/3 of what it is now, or less, in purchasing power in today's prices. So you have to get another job. We have to develop another business. And then, thinking just from our own family dynamic on, well, how do we build more in the Bitcoin space? What can we do? We're not technologists. We're not this, we're not that, but we're working on ideas to maybe, help New Zealand develop something, get something going here. We're still, looking for ideas, but realizing that the way he's existed for the last 30 years as a firefighter, it's not a very good future. It's not looking like a very good future at the moment. And that's right across the middle class jobs, the policemen, the firemen, the teachers, the nurses, the doctors, all of these things are being hit with the same thing. And so we need to do something now.
I mean, I'm right there with you. I mean, I think that creeping nihilism is one of the biggest issues we face, to be completely honest. And it comes from an understandable place. It's, we can't necessarily, as a population, as an individual, we can't necessarily see all of these pressures that are creating this change, but we can feel the change, right?
Yeah.
We can feel that, the pay that we're getting for the job that we had for the last 3 years is just not, getting done what it got done 3 years ago. And we can see that it's, if it continues on this trajectory, it's not going to work. And I think these types of conversations are important because, like there's a, lobbying for change and creating change at the sort of country level. We sort of hit on that a second ago, but I think more importantly is individuals making decisions to do things differently for themselves, right? And I think, for me, that means, spending more of my time and energy in the Bitcoin world and quitting my what was a really good job to go and take a risk on a business like this was me going, this is important and it needs to happen, right? And I think, the more and more we can get the message out about like the solution to this problem exists, right? The problem being at the highest level, that the monetary system is been developed in a way to to steal value from the people that are out there living their lives, right? And when we can start to recognize that, take the energy that we're putting into our jobs, to our businesses today, and store that into the future as step one, right? The store value thing around better money, store that into the future. Whatever I can scramble together that is more value
Get
than
off
I need to
zero.
spend, just freeze that into the future so that it's there next year, right? And that's step one, right? Step one is that value is there next year. And the more and more we can get people to understand that, the more and more that they can make that individual decision. I'm going to store this little bit of energy that I've created and I've been able to tuck away. I'm going to make sure that's there for me 2 years from now. And that's how we erode that nihilism, right? Like, I can start to see, through this journey, a future where like the energy that I have, that I've put in the past can carry me forward. But not just that. I can see value in putting energy into the future, right? I can see value in putting energy into the next thing because I know that if I can create enough value, I can store that too. And we can all move forward, and me and my family can move forward, right? We're talking about the individual level. The more that we can, get people to identify that there is a way to, escape that nihilism, and, that transitions that nihilism from nihilism to hope, right? You can see that change happening in people all the time.
It's happened with us. It's definitely like without finding Bitcoin, and it doesn't mean you're rich and you've got millions of Bitcoin or anything. but just putting a, a cup of coffee away a day sort of level, whatever it is that you can DCA, dollar cost average into Bitcoin just to get off zero. It's what I, try to talk to friends and family about, is just get off zero, get started, because once you've actually bought your first Bitcoin and you know how to self-custody it, and there's a lot to learn in that, and we're teaching people that, it is then you've done that once, and even if it was $100, right, and you put that away, then you've understood how the system works, and then you're interested because you've put some money down on the table. So then you start listening about what is happening in the Bitcoin space. Oh, Bitcoin's gone up today. Oh, it's gone down. Or, well, and you start listening and you start learning and you start your journey in the Bitcoin world. And that's how we all started, right? And we're all just all on this huge learning journey, and it really is deeper and deeper and deeper that I go, the more the technicals that I'm trying to understand, the payment networks that I'm trying to understand, the apps, all of that's in this bubble of this new monetary system is exciting. And the more time I spend in that, the happier I am, the less nihilism I feel. And there are times when you still feel it and you're still like, oh my God, I can't make ends meet, and I can't, but it becomes less and less so, because you've got a plan, you've got a future, you know where you're going, and you're working in a system with other people that are pretty damn cool doing the same sort of thing. And one by one by one. And this is the beauty of having podcasts and everybody talking about this, and we can go and learn about it. That's the exciting part. I think that it's just like, Jeff said, I said to Jeff, oh, thanks for coming on my show, mate. I know you get 100 million, requests, and, I'm no Joe Rogan, and he said, like, everybody is a node in the network and everybody is important. And you might touch some person that needed to hear this and they become some massive person in this space. You just don't know, right? And he said, that's exactly the way Sailor started. That's exactly the way Natalie Brunel started. And, he named a few of his other friends that are very big in this space. He said to just keep on rocking with that and keep doing that. And I was like, wow, that's just epic. To think that, yeah, I'm a node in the network, so to speak. I'm not running a node yet. That's my next mission. Got to learn to run a node. But all these technical things that don't come natural to me. Yeah, we have to, I'm all about, like, if you're weak at something, work on it. So you might not be technically minded, but you can work on it and become better. You might not become the greatest, but you might become proficient.
No, that's all right. I mean, you absolutely are a node on the network, and it's funny. I sometimes, weeks go by, and I feel like I know all of the Bitcoiners in New Zealand, right? I feel feels very lonely sometimes, and I was really happy when you reached out, because I found another one that I didn't know, right? Like that's great.
Me too. That's
And
exactly.
so that just to add on to something you said there, like that shift from nihilism to hope is just one thing, but I think you know I think the journey we hope we see over time is we can get as many people as possible to touch Bitcoin in some way, in a positive way, right? Just a conversation like this, they hear it, or they have a conversation with someone on the street, like, or they see it in a shop, right? Like, just these touch points here and there over time is ultimately what's really necessary. And I think, you know, hearing these most of the time when people are introduced to Bitcoin for the first time, it's through their crypto exchange or whatever, and like the the narrative is different. Let's just say that, like, it's about investment and gambling and
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
that, and
Yeah.
I think the more we can introduce this concept to the broader world, I think the more traction we'll see. And eventually, where we want to get to is that people recognize what we've started to recognize and start demanding Bitcoin, right? They start demanding something different. They start asking for this, right? And, for yourself and in your business, for other people that are running their own small business, you know, that is the destination, is that, like, you know, enough people have touched it, enough people have seen it, enough people have it in their hands that everyone can start saying, I don't want this other money anymore.
Yeah.
I want that money.
Exactly. And it
And
takes
that's,
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's going to take a long time. Yep.
But like you said, you were introduced to Bitcoin, way back, quite a way back, and you weren't sure whether it was going to make it, and you didn't, that thought that's a really interesting concept, and a lot of people thought that this is an interesting concept, but the governments are never going to allow it, and they'll break it, and this, there was many reasons to doubt it at that point. Now we're at a point where what are we, the third or the fourth biggest asset in the world? We might be second by the end of the year, behind gold. We're a big asset class now, and yet we've still got a long, long, long way to run.
Hmm.
The big players are coming in, the institutions are coming in, the banks in America are setting up rails, the governments of the world are starting to slowly come in, sovereign wealth funds are coming in, hedge funds, BlackRock, which we can debate as, good, bad, or otherwise, but these institutions coming in is making it more mainstream, is getting the word out there, is starting to break into the consciousness. And we probably do need to have a certain amount of institutional adoption for this to get to the size that we need it to get to in order for it to become a future financial system. And to be able to change over time the financial system that we have now, this broken money system where they print money out of thin air. They can just devalue your hard-earned, your hard work that you did to make you a little bit of money, and then they go and just print and they devalue that money and they steal that off you through that mechanism. That we need to shift into this hard money system, and there's some brilliant books out there if people are interested, things like Broken Money or the Big Print by Larry Lepard, Broken Money by Lynn Alden, of course The Price of Tomorrow by Jeff Booth, plenty of others that are out there, the Bitcoin Standard, Saifedean Ammous, all of these ones where you can start to understand the monetary history and get your head around it, and just start on that journey, just be a little bit curious. Brendan, before we wrap up, because I've already taken up an hour of your precious time, what any final words on where this is going, what your hopes are for the future, and where can people reach out to you if they want to start groups within their area and maybe start getting the Lightning Network up and going in their businesses? How do they reach out to you and get started on that journey?
Yeah, good question. So we're Lightning Pay. We're at lightningpay.nz. You can contact us there. That's the easiest thing. If you're it, you know, if you are thinking about diving in, right? So if you're a small business owner thinking about accepting Bitcoin payments, we try to make it as easy as we can, right? And we're really set up for small business on premises. We do have some online payment options, but whatever it is that you're interested in doing, like we're here to make successful Bitcoiners. So like fundamentally, like we'll talk to you about it. We'll work through it, even if we have to recommend something that we don't offer. Like we're here to make people successful, and that's really what we're after. So just reach out. That's the easiest thing. If you're interested in sort of developing a broader community, we can help with that too. We've already, you mentioned potentially being interested in that yourself. We've had 4 or 5 others see what we started trying to do in Bitcoin
Yeah.
Basin,
Yes.
and we
Looks
just
bad.
share all of our resources and hand them over and talk to people about what we're doing and hope they're going to do the same thing because we like I said, the change that we see in the future is really just an iterative process by which individuals make decisions to move themselves, into Bitcoin
Yep.
more and more,
A
and
grassroots
eventually start
movement.
demanding Bitcoin, right? And that's how I see this process going is it's an individual one at a time making a decision for themselves until we reach that destination. If you're interested in taking any of the resources we have and deploying it in your community, talking about how we can collaborate or do different things, yeah, absolutely reach out. Like we're happy to help anyone achieve
Wonderful.
something similar. So we are, sometimes to a fault, pretty mission driven. Like we're interested in seeing Bitcoin as money, right? The investment thing is still not how I see Bitcoin.
Mm.
It is it's important to tear away the distinction between savings and investments, right? Bitcoin is money. Money you use for saving, spending, sometimes investing, sometimes giving. That's what Bitcoin is, right? And so we're really just, if you've got a use case for better money in one of those buckets, we're happy to talk. Just reach out and we'll see what we can do.
No, that's absolutely brilliant, Brandon. I'm definitely going to have more conversations with you. I'd love to invite you back on when you got more things to share, or if you've got other people that you think would be good to come on the show to share what's going on in New Zealand and how we can keep supporting this. You mentioned BitKiwi
Yep.
and the Bitcoin Council. What was that called again?
Bitcoin Policy Institute, New Zealand.
Yeah. That, all of these things are ways that maybe people can get involved or follow the progress there, or make a little push towards their MPs and stuff to help promote what we're talking about here. But Brandon, fundamentally, I'm just so glad to have met you, and I'm so glad because I've just been studying on my own little world, and mostly American stuff. So now that I'm sort of connecting with people in Kiwi land doing this, and then I just happen to have a show which is fantastic because then I can just share this and provide a platform for people to start sharing this sort of work. It's exciting. It's exciting. It's another little progress forward for Bitcoin and for what we all hope is a better future for our country and for our kids and for humanity in general. I think so. It's pretty deep.
That's great. I mean, I'm happy to have discovered you and your show as well. And thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brendan.